service is worth it. My name is Nadia Farjoud, and I'm with Political Parity, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization educating and engaging actors and allies to increase women's political representation across the country. Today, we're going to speak with a prominent elected leader and advocate who is changing the face of politics in New York City and across the country. A quick note for those of you who are watching, if you have a question or a comment and want to chime in, please tweet it out with the hashtag #MarchToParity, P-A-R-I-T-Y. Today, it is a singular privilege to speak with New York City Council Speaker Speaker Mark-Viverito, the first Puerto Rican and Latina to hold a citywide elected position in New York City. After Mayor Bill de Blasio, Speaker Mark-Viverito holds New York City's second most powerful post in politics. Political Parity, the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, and Latinas Represent honor your tireless advocacy for a more reflective and effective democracy. Speaker, we enjoyed seeing you in New York at the Hispanic Federation last year and are totally grateful that you're joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Let's just jump in and start about with your path to public service. How did you first get interested in politics, and how did you navigate the decision to run for office and then ultimately make that jump?
Well, I think, because I know the focus here is primarily women, and I know sometimes we really need to encourage women to run for office, but I tell people that my formation, having been raised in Puerto Rico by a very strong woman who was active in the feminist movement, I believe many feminists in Puerto Rico raised me and showed me how to be very strong in terms of being able to voice myself and express myself. And my father was also very socially conscious. So I think all that laid kind of like the foundation of my interest in being able to help others and to be very vocal, in particular when any sort of injustice kind of exists. And I graduated college, came to Columbia University, and then started working in the nonprofit sector. I really wanted to work with the Latino community, but it was through the activism and through being engaged in my community that others approached me and asked me to consider running for office. So it was something that came out of others who said, listen, I think, we could really use your voice. We think there's somewhat of a vacuum of leadership. Would you consider this? So it didn't kind of naturally evolve from me. And I think that's one of the things you hear about women running for office, that it's usually you have to ask them and encourage them and push them. So any sort of organization that is really centered on encouraging more women to run is incredibly important. But that's how I came to be in this position. And now I want to be able to utilize this position and the road I've been able to travel on to encourage others to consider it as well.
And on the topic of trying to convince people to think about pursuing careers or opportunities in public service, unfortunately, politics today is largely considered to be polarized, unproductive, and even fraught with vitriol. Some of the research out there suggests that Congress has a lower approval rating than cockroaches, traffic jams, or even root canals. So just to give us some hope, why is a career in public service or getting involved in civic life important and worth it?
It's completely important, and it is worth it, because if you really are concerned about the way things are running now, if you're concerned with the way government is, if you're concerned about the way electoral politics is shaped, then the only way to change it is to become involved and show that things can be done differently and show that it doesn't have to be politics as usual. And so that's the only way. That's why I really encourage people, at whatever level of comfort you have to be engaged, whether it's on a community board in your local community, or whether it's involved in a civic organization. We have to build and work towards building the society we want to live in. So, we have to really be vocal and active and engaged, and that's important. So really, I know that there's a lot of cynicism out there. I face it every day when I ran for office originally. That was what I would hear in the community. Oh, you all are the same. You forget about us once you get elected, that kind of stuff. And you want to show that things can be done in a different way. So I'm very committed to this. And I think that through through being able to also, as a speaker, adopt and embrace techniques that really maybe are not, participatory governance, when we talk about participatory budgeting, when we talk about using digital media and technology as a way of including more people in the conversation. So those are things that are really important, and I would encourage people to consider public service as one way of making change in our world.
So you touched on this a little bit in terms of some of the challenges. Leading a public and political life is not without its barriers. How do you manage the criticism and the attacks?
I think that's something that is important. As long as you're rooted and you consistently engage with those that you represent, as long as you can be able to be transparent and engage in a conversation as to why you arrive at the decisions you arrive at, I think that there's real opportunity for understanding. I'm clear with my constituents that there are going to be many times when you agree with me, but there are going to be those times when you don't, because I can't please everybody. That's just impossible. Anyone that tries or even attempts to please everybody is just not doing their job, right? You have to be able to have your values, what your convictions are, be transparent and accountable. And even if I have a different point of view, as long as I can explain to you why I made that decision, I think people respect that. And that's something that you don't really hear very often. A lot of times I think people want to pander, and that's not something that is really constructive. So I approach my job that way. So yes, I understand that there are going to be those that criticize me because they may not agree with the decision that I arrive at. But I am very clear about the decisions I make. I'm very committed to the decisions I make. And if at some point down the line I make a mistake, I'm more than happy to also accept responsibility. That's the way that I approach this position, and I'm able to at least balance and handle the criticism.
Earlier, you touched on the importance of being engaged in the process of making the kind of government that you want to see. And I'm curious, how have your personal life experiences informed your public leadership? And as speaker, what are the issues you are spotlighting with your platform?
Definitely, and that's why I believe that when you talk about governance in whatever level you're talking about, having diverse voices and obviously gender balance in the positions is critically important, because that experience that each of us, as a woman, I have experiences that men could never understand, right? Or just have a different reality. That I think that voice is really important as we develop public policies, as we make budgetary decisions, as we adopt budgets. Having all those diverse voices is critical. So my personal experiences have shaped that. Not only, I tell people that being a Puerto Rican, born and raised on the island, I've never been criticized for being Puerto Rican because everyone is Puerto Rican. But when you come to the United States, when I came to New York and I went into an Ivy League institution, there were people that didn't even know how to address me, or that had their certain set of prejudices. That was a whole new experience for me, that I learned a lot through that. And that's something that I think others may not be able to relate to, right? So all those experiences, whatever they are, really help bring that perspective to the table that is invaluable, making government much more responsive to the needs of the diverse constituencies that exist.
Great. We have a question coming in from Twitter from Rachel Isaacs. Can you share some success stories that have made all of the pitfalls of public service worth it in the end?
I think, and this is one of the things I talk to people about, I think this is one of the reasons why I love being a local New York City representative. What really inspires me and what makes everything worth it is when I'm able to travel throughout the city or through my community, and people approach me to thank me for a position that I've taken, or for thanking me for my stance on immigration reform, or thanking me for the legislation that we've passed that has, for instance, created a municipal ID program that is accessible to anyone regardless of immigration status. When you get that validation where you're able to really tangibly see that the work you're engaged in is positively impacting somebody's life, and they're taking the time to thank you for that, it makes everything worth it. And that really is the reason that I have a hard time thinking that I would enjoy being up in Albany or being in DC, because I need that personal interaction, with my constituents. And I enjoy being able to learn from them what their challenges are and how they feel that government can be responsive to them. So we every day are looking at the city council on what legislation we could pass, what public policies can we engage in that is going to be inclusive of the vast majority in this city.
We've talked a little bit about women in politics overall, but turning to Latinas specifically, our Latinas Represent research shows that Latinas make up about 1% at every level of government, local, state, and national. Of the more than 12,000 people who have served in Congress since the founding of Congress in the country, only 11 have been Latina. No Latina has ever served in the US Senate, and only one has served as a governor. Why do you think these numbers are so low, and what do you think we can do to change them?
So it's obviously a real problem. And I think this leads perfectly into one of the issues that has become kind of a pet project for me, and it's a little bit of a peeve too. If we want to get Latinas elected at the larger levels of government, we have to create pipelines, right, that is going to help cultivate them, nurture them, and give them the experience to run for higher office. So here in New York City, in this city council, in the most progressive city, and in this beautiful city that everybody looks to, we have 51 city council members representing 8.3 million New Yorkers. Out of those 51, only 15 are women. And in the next election cycle, which is coming up, 6 out of those 15 women are term limited. And all 6 of those are women of color. So if we don't do something to encourage women to run, to nurture them, to create those opportunities, we're going to have a city council in New York that could have 10 women out of 51, and that's not acceptable. So we got to create and expand those pipelines, because those are the pipelines from which we're going to look for the next state senator, that we're going to look for the next U.S. senator, that we're going to look for the next congressperson or congresswoman. It's from those local municipal levels. So I'm very committed to figuring out how we can expand those pipelines, not only here in New York City, but hopefully this is a challenge that we can promote otherwise. Because if we want to see those people at higher levels, we've got to start nurturing that and cultivating that at the local level. So this is a real issue. And I think that that's what we have to do. We have to encourage women to represent at their local community boards. So really, really encouraging that and challenging our unions, challenging any organizations that get involved in electoral politics to be able to recruit and encourage women to run as well.
Great. And to your point on encouragement actually works really well with a question from Marnie Allen, the director of political Parity. Hi, Marnie. Who asked, how did you personally find mentors to support your public service journey and get that encouragement that you're talking about to build those critical pipelines to run down the line?
I mean, I always looked for women that I could, having come to New York basically without my family, I was here by myself. I needed to really build a network around myself of support. So once I graduated college and going into the nonprofit sector, I tried to seek out women that were going to push me and encourage me, and that saw potential in me and wanted to take the time to really invest in me. And I had to seek that out. And not only, not everybody does that. Some women, we have to kind of pull them out of that, comfort zone and have them think that they have potential, right, beyond what they may see immediately as their reality. I went and I looked for it in some great women that I had the pleasure to meet, like Dr. Antonia Pantoja, who became a mentor to me, Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, who was the first Latina New York State Secretary of State. You have to seek that out, but sometimes they're going to be those young women that maybe are too timid or too shy to look for mentors. And we have to make sure that we are proactively engaged in nurturing the potential of every young woman that we meet.
Thank you. A question from Stephanie Yanis. What organizations should Latinas who would like to run in New York City join, or what kind of organizations, opportunities, programs that you know of that would really help young Latinas especially get on that journey?
Well, that's one of the challenges. I'm not 100% familiar with all those organizations that are out there. I know we have the organizations that we're aware of here in New York, like there's an Emily's List, or there's an organization called Eleanor's Legacy. There are a couple of training programs out of New Jersey. But I think that that's more for women that kind of have found the path, that's the path they want to go in, whether it's political engagement. I think my interest is really how do we start cultivating that interest earlier on. So whether there may be some organizations that exist that I'm not fully aware of, I'd love to learn about them. But if we have to create an organization, then I would want to add my voice to that. But there definitely is a lot of room for growth here, because sometimes we also have to challenge existing organizations to think about being a little bit more inclusive. and diverse in their approach, right, in terms of communities that they work with. And we have to do that together.
Fantastic. Since taking office, something we've noticed you've been pounding the pavement for is encouraging people to actively participate in politics by voting. And this is quite a challenge given that the voter turnout in 2014, in the 2014 midterms, was the lowest it's been in 72 years since 1942. And regarding Latino voter turnout specifically, an article quoted you as saying, "This means for all the success stories about a giant being awoken, we still have not fully roused from our slumber." And my question for you is, how can we wake up the sleeping giant of the American electorate?
That's always difficult, right? Because, you first have to, I represent a district that maybe does not have the highest, voter participation. And a lot of times, I think particularly when you talk about low-income communities and communities of color, there is been such a disinvestment in communities like ours that people just become very disillusioned that government could ever be responsive to. And that does, lend to people not wanting to actively engage. That's why we have to show people that government can work on your behalf. So I know that I'm teaming up with the Latino Victory Project. Their goal is to really try to mobilize and energize the Latino base in the next presidential election and the congressional elections coming up. And I want to be a part of that because we really need to understand and have people understand that your vote does count. And if we do not try to mobilize as a block and let the next president know that he or she was elected because of our engagement, then there's going to be less hesitant, they're going to be more hesitant to respond to our concerns. So we have to demonstrate that we have that power, and that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of work that people engage and trust. And that's why we're implementing. Many of us here in the city council are looking to processes like participatory budgeting, participatory governance, things that will encourage people to engage with us and have them understand the power of their voice and of their vote. And that's not something that's going to take time. But we had record numbers in the last presidential cycle in terms of Latinos. We just got to move the dial and keep the dial forward. And I'm definitely committed to doing that.
Fantastic. To follow up on an earlier question about mentoring, we have one about from Twitter. How do you pull women up behind you in your daily life as speaker? Because of course you have many demands on your time, you have a very busy schedule, but how do you still find time to mentor and provide support to women who are interested in pursuing a political career?
Well, that's something that you have to be very conscious of. And I know that at least here in the council, although we're 15 women, which is unfortunately low, I try to create opportunities for my colleagues to really demonstrate and exercise that leadership. In our offices, my local office in my district, we try to bring young women interns in the office. I just had a lunch with 6 young women that were interns in my office during the past 8 months, and really give my time. And they were asking me about my life experience and asking me, any advice that I would give them. So I do take the time to when I'm invited to speak to young women or to women in general, to talk about my experience and what I believe in. You have to make the time for that. It has to become a priority for you because that one interaction could just mobilize and motivate that person to go beyond what their interest is. For me, I'm looking, and I've already identified someone that I would like to replace me, a woman, obviously, as a Latina in the position. I'm making sure that I'm acting, on the concerns that I've expressed. And now I've identified a woman. I'm working with her, cultivating her leadership, nurturing her leadership so that she can then run when my position becomes vacant in 2.5 years. So I would challenge others to do the same thing, is that we need to look at that pool of women that are around us, see the potential in someone, and then invest the time to really make sure that they're prepared for the next step.
That's incredibly inspiring. I'm so glad that you've already found your replacement and you still have your for 3 more years. So congratulations on that. Another question I had is, so you run for office, you are voted in, and it's day one. You're the Speaker of the Council. What happens at that point? How is it being the only Latina on the council? How is it becoming the speaker for the first time? How did you learn what to do on the job? Were there people that you went to? What's it like making that transition from campaigning to governing?
So, I mean, this is my 10th year as a city council member. So I had been in the city council for 8 years. So I saw what the council is like. I understand. I see, had interacted with the last speaker. And so you identify things that you like, maybe you don't like, things you'd like to change. My leadership style is very different from the norm. So day one was just to start kind of getting an understanding. There is the aspect of being a legislative body and legislating and enacting laws and negotiating the budget with the mayor. But there's also the administrative aspects of being a city council, of managing an institution. And coming from an activist background, but my master's is in public administration, I wanted to look at the city council as an organization and how do we change the culture? How do we turn it around so that it's much more inclusive of all the members and it's not just about me as the speaker? How do I empower my colleagues? Because if we want to move a progressive agenda forward, we're all in it together, and people have to take ownership for what it is that we're doing, and not making it seem like it's my agenda that I'm trying to ram down their throats, right? So this has been really on that front. I tell people that's the balance, is looking at the city council as an organization and changing the culture of the organization, and also as a legislative body and working to prioritize a set of issues and policies that we want to advance. So that really was what I did when I first came in through the doors, just to get an understanding of it from both those angles, and then start heading in a direction that was going to make this institution be much more collaborative.
Regarding changing the culture and entering the city council infrastructure and trying from within to change how it functions, there's, I think, some frustration that, or at least excitement that turns into frustration when women, people of color, anyone is running for office and they're advocating for a certain agenda, and then they get in and the conformity pressures kind of change the authenticity of what they were advocating for in the first place, or some of the claims that they made on their campaign. How do you maintain that dignity, and how do you continue to fulfill an authentic leadership style all throughout, from the campaign to governing, and not lose sight of that authentic leadership that you bring?
And that's an excellent question, because that really is the challenge for a lot of us, right? And I think I tell people very clearly, there has to be, you have to figure out what your moral compass is, right? What are those values that to you are just, you can't compromise, right? There are going to be those things that you feel so strongly about that you're like, what, there's a really hard line that I'm not going to go beyond. And you have to be able to define that. And there are those issues, and you have to be able to clearly express that, and that you can be clear with people that you're not going to be moved on certain things. But the reality of not only being in politics, but the reality of life, that everything is about negotiation, right? You may have a friend that wants to do something that you don't want to do. Oh, you try to negotiate. Okay, what's the middle ground, right? The same in politics. There's going to be things that you want to advance that others may not feel the same way. How do you negotiate? And they're going to be within that negotiation. There are going to be certain things that you may be flexible on. And then there are going to be those certain things that you're not going to be flexible on. So you have to be able to be clear and not be moved on what it is that you hold dear. And that's not easy for people, because there are always going to be those pressures. And believe me, I feel them every day with right now, where, you have the incessant kind of people criticizing you. But if you really believe in what you believe in, then it's going to be easy to be able to defend it. So it is a challenge, because there are those that sometimes may have a hard time doing that. As I stated earlier, may try to bend everywhere they can to accommodate everyone, and that's just not realistic. And you're going to really drive yourself crazy, and you're going to be someone that people believe you can't rely on, or people that are going to know that you don't have convictions. That's not the kind of person that you should want to be, or you should become. With me, the people like, okay, I may not agree with her, but she's very clear and she really believes in what she believes in. And I think that that's a much better place to be. So you can get respect out of that. You're not going to get respect in the other way. So, it's very personal, but people have to figure out what those lines are for you and where you're going to draw the line.
My last question for you is, what gives you hope about the future of American politics, and what do you see as the future for young women, women of color, and women overall in politics?
You know, I'm a very optimistic person, and I think that yes, there are obviously a lot of points of frustration, but there's always ways that you can work a particular issue and chip away, you know, at what it is you may think is wrong, right? If we, again, like I was saying, that's, you know, where you have to start forging that at the local levels is, you know, we here in New York City know that everybody looks at us, right? Everybody wants to come to New York City. Everybody loves New York City. And so what we put out there as our set of priorities, our values, the budgets we adopt, sends a very strong message about what we believe in. And I think that this gives me a lot of inspiration in terms of the work that I'm doing, that I can inspire other women, other Latinas to consider running for office. And although sometimes the national dynamic may seem a little dire, it doesn't mean that you're not going to speak out and still believe, you know, in the values that you believe in, and work to try to make sure that that national dynamic changes. So, you know, you can't give up. You know, we all know change only happens when we act. And if you decide not to act, then you can't expect a different result. And so you have to figure out what you're comfortable with. You're not gonna, not every woman that's listening today is gonna wanna run for office. Maybe you wanna be a public policy director. Maybe you wanna be a chief of staff. Maybe you wanna, you know, work in a different capacity. You have to figure out what it is, but you have to do something. And that's what I would encourage, and that's what I truly believe in. And despite how dire something may look, there's always gonna be a silver lining someplace, and you gotta find it for yourself. So I'm really excited about wanting to work on creating a national movement, encouraging other Latinas to run, and really change the dynamic that we have right now, which is a real stalemate.
Thank you, Speaker. I think I'm on webinar high. You are so incredibly inspiring, and we honor your leadership and are excited to be in touch with you and see all that you do in New York City and beyond.
Thank you so much, Nadia. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Feel free to continue the conversation with #MarchToParity. And I think the speaker is on Instagram and Twitter, right?
Yes, I am. And
Fantastic.
They're both my accounts. Nobody else handles them.
Okay. Well, feel free to follow her, get involved, and we will see you on the Twitterverse and hopefully in person soon. Thanks, everyone.